Good evening, Toastmasters, and welcome to Seminar Sunday, District 21's weekly webinar series. Today, the topic is membership orientation. Such a critical part of onboarding new members is the orientation where we bring the members up to speed on how our clubs operate, as well as get our members to know the newest members to the club, to ensure everyone is happy and continues remaining a Toastmaster member, hopefully long term. I'm really excited to dive into this topic, and thank you for joining us this evening. It's certainly a topic that is close to my heart, as I've seen clubs doing it the right way, and unfortunately I've seen some clubs doing it not quite the right way as well. So it is nice to be here with you to be able to cover this topic. As always, feel free to use the chat as well as the question and answer at the top of your screen. Happy to converse with you in either way, and if necessary, we can also bring people up to live. All right, with that being said, let's move on to, first of all, I'd like to highlight as well that this, as I mentioned at the top of the the webinar, that we have a weekly episode of this. Next week, we've got how to conduct an open house, and we've got some other interesting themes coming up through the months of October, November, and beyond. We'll do this every week until mid-December, take a break for a couple of weeks, and then we'll hit the ground running again in January. If there's topics that you're not sure if they're coming up, feel free to contact us as well, and we can either let you know when they're going to come up or see if there's a possibility of scheduling them in a future episode. So first, I wanted to start this particular session out by looking at the moments of truth. So we'll get into that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about options, how we can orient new members. So one of my favorite methods is to use a booklet. And then, of course, if you guys have ideas through the course of this webinar, I encourage you to raise those as well, because certainly I am not the only expert. Everyone on the line has some great ideas, I'm sure. When you go through moments of truth, this is what you see. I'm not going to read it all, of course, but this is the recommendation. Those points below the first paragraph are what moments of truth measure a club on quality based off of. So, of course, it includes things like the new member, inductions, mentorship program, making people aware of the education program and figure out what their needs are. And then, of course, getting them feeling welcomed and involved and doing speaking roles and all those other things that are so critical for a brand new member of a club to be involved with. So that is the official definition for moments of truth. But what does that truly mean? I mean, that's on paper, but how do you do that? That's I think the biggest challenge, and every club does it differently. So I don't know that there's exactly a right way to do it. I would suggest there's probably some wrong ways to do it that exist, but everybody has various ideas, and it sometimes depends on your club culture as well, because every club culture is typically very unique. And a club that meets, for example, 7 o'clock in the morning probably has a slightly different demographic than a club that meets 9 o'clock at night. You're selling your club to different parties, and therefore the needs when you're onboarding a new member may be slightly different as a result of that. I'm going to break up each one of these points and kind of discuss it in a little bit of detail. And as you have questions, please let me know as well, and we'll walk through those questions. First thing is an orientation agenda. This is something that the content I've got through most of this presentation is actually from 3 different clubs in district. All 3 of them are with District 21, actually. And this particular item, I know it's relatively small on the screen, but the intention, of course, is not necessarily to read it, but just to recognize that some clubs actually have an agenda for how to orient the new members. And that's more for the officers of the club or whoever's taking care of onboarding those new members. Probably the VP Education and VP Membership are both heavily involved, or should be heavily involved at least, with the process and getting those new members in. So there's various things that you've got to think about, such as scheduling of them, when you're doing the induction. If you're doing an induction, hopefully you are. How to support them, how to make them aware of the mentorship program, aware of the education program, and even sometimes aware of what happens outside the club. Because, you know, if there's a conference coming up or some sort of special event, you may want to invite them to that. For example, one of the divisions in District 21 is working very hard on putting together an excellent pathways session. And new members would be definitely welcome at something like that because it's going to help them understand the education program. So if you put all those things on some sort of agenda, and it can look however you want it to, then you're going to find huge benefits because the process will be a little bit more formalized, consistent, because most clubs, I would suggest, are off and on. So, you know, a new member may join this week and they're getting the royal treatment with the whole meal deal. Next week, a member joins and there's spots of what they receive, but not the whole meal deal. So it's nice to have that consistency. So the induction of new members. I'm curious how your clubs do it. So please share in the chat now, if you can, how your club does the inductions. Is it something you do on an ad hoc basis? Is it scheduled monthly, just into the agenda? Is it formal, informal? Is it fun, serious? I'd like to see some of the comments so we can share that through the course of this session. But while we're waiting for your comments and what you do, I'd just like to point out that Toastmasters International does provide certificates, and I strongly encourage certificates. One of the things that our club does as well is provides a membership pin when new members join, and that's just something to reassure them that, hey, you know, you've joined this program, you're part of this club, and it's little things like that that we as humans appreciate getting, certificates or pins and those types of things. We're all in it for the widgets. So I strongly encourage that. If you don't do that right now, consider getting into that. And it doesn't have to be the one purchase from Toastmasters International, as long as it's got the appropriate branding on it and you're respecting the different branding elements. By all means, make your own as a club. Make it unique. And that way, you've kind of got a brand, you know, a sub-brand, I should say, for your club as well, based on the way you design it. So that is an important element. There is a script available online as well, and I'd happily share that with you after this webinar has completed. I noticed Sean here has commented that his club has an ad hoc, so it's no formal process or certificate of membership. So I'm curious how that works in your club then, Sean. Perhaps you could share. Would you mind if we brought you on the line to share? Yes, I can. There we are. You're on now.
Okay, there you go. I belong to two clubs, neither of which has a scheduled. They're both ad hoc as far as when they do new member orientations, and that's probably because they don't have necessarily new members every month. So that adds one thing, and also I know that at least one of the clubs, which is a smaller club, doesn't necessarily follow a complete script. They don't have a prepared script that they hand out to the existing members to recite the induction promise for either the new member. I don't think they use the new member induction promise, or have the members make their promise back to the new member. Which the larger clubs that I belonged to in the past did that, and the ones where I was more active in, as in president or other officer roles, and insisted on that being the process, because you want to have that whole that formalized process. It makes the members feel more welcome and brings them on board. Only one club have I been a member of that ever gave out the Toastmaster member certificates. I like that approach, though. It does take more work, and you do have to generate them, but you don't have to buy them directly from Toastmasters. You can actually create your own that is specific for your club.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So, no, is there any reading of when they do happen though? Do you read the induction kind of script?
The ones that are the larger clubs do use the induction script. The smaller one that I belong to, I'm not going to mention names, but one of the smaller ones I belong to, as far as I know, doesn't do that. Although I don't recall actually being there for an induction ceremony. Maybe they haven't done one at all. And I do believe it's important to do it because then the member feels that there's a commitment that they're making, and they hold to that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's really important. Okay, thanks for sharing, Sean.
My pleasure.
We've also got a comment here from Jan at Norvik. We asked the new member and 2 members of the executive to read the induction script together, give them a club personalized certificate, and take a photo for the club website and Facebook page. So that is an excellent idea, especially using that as a kind of a publicity thing. Hey, we're bringing in new members. We're still alive. We've got that energy. That's really reassuring for potential guests and new members. And she mentions as well that it's important to have a brief ceremony in front of the club so that everyone can be reminded of the Toastmasters promise. So I would fully agree with that. The Toastmasters promise is something that people often forget. And I think we're all guilty to some degree at times of forgetting, well, wait a second, this is what we said we were going to do. There's many important things in there about preparing our projects from the Toastmasters education program, serving the club, attending meetings regularly. Life gets in the way, of course, so it is very hard to abide by the promise, but it's also very important to have a successful club. You absolutely need to follow the Toastmasters promise. So reminding the club of that is very important. There is a session from the Successful Club series on the Toastmasters promise, but that's an excellent way to get the reminder out there. At one of my clubs, another thing we did is we did the proper formal induction where we read out the script and everything, and then each member of the club in attendance for that ceremony actually got up and walked around. We walked around the table and shook the new member's hand one after another and kind of just did one cycle around the table each. And that was just kind of a way to make it a little bit more fun instead of kind of, oh, here we go again with reading that script. It was more, all right, well, after this, we get to stand up, shake the member's hand, and just make them feel a little bit more included. So we found great results in that. Something to consider if you're in an officer role right now that has some responsibility over that, is maybe find a way to spice it up, and that could be it, or any other method that you think would make it more interesting. Anna mentions that you have a ceremony of induction. We don't give a certificate, but we do give them the original name tag of the club. Okay, that's also really an important part. Some clubs I know do that as well, where you don't get your name tag until you are inducted into the club. So once again, though, that's another tool that can be used to kind of make them feel really included and add just some importance to the ceremony, because the last thing you want it to do is, eventually as time goes on, it becomes kind of stale and nobody's really interested anymore. You want it to be something that people, I don't know that it has to be, they look forward to it, but it's certainly not a part of the meeting that they want to fall asleep. It's a part of the meeting that they're like, oh, this is cool. We're welcoming this member in, and give that member the positive energy that they need to get into the program and get into your club. So thank you for those that have shared on that. I really encourage you to take advantage of the certificates, and especially at least using the induction script. I'll send one after this meeting just to make sure that everybody's got one of those scripts, and send a couple other resources as well that we uncovered through the conversation. Mentorship. This is another spot that is really important, and I don't want to get into as much detail about this because I know these are one of the sessions in themselves about mentorship and the importance of running a mentorship program in your club. And Pathways is really reinforcing that heavily. But what I would encourage you to do is, if you're mentoring somebody or you're working with somebody that's going to be mentoring a member, is reinforce to them the importance of goal setting with that new member. Something that Jan and Sean and I have been talking a lot about recently is from the International Convention, one of the things that was trained was the importance of, if you're trying to sell a Toastmasters club, for example, to an organization, going in and telling them what we offer is not the right approach. Instead, what you want to do is you want to go in and see what their needs are, and then you let them know how their needs can be met by having a Toastmasters program in their organization. And if we switch that around to new members, how appropriate is that as well? When you think, oh, wait a second, I could tell the new member, well, here's how you do public speaking, and yeah, we got leaders in the club as well, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's not really going to help them, because they've probably come for some reason. And by identifying that reason that they've walked through the door as a mentor, you can kind of tailor a little bit for them. Oh, well, this is actually part of the program, or you're also going to get this benefit, or this is somehow going to connect with your ultimate goal. Because, you know, sometimes right away, they stand up at the start of the meeting and they say, well, I'm here because I've been asked to be MC for a wedding in August. Obviously, they just want to, get their skills built up to a level where they can stand in front of that crowd. But then there's other people, you don't necessarily know why, or you don't know what their deeper goals are. So I encourage you, take that approach, just like the approach to sell a Toastmasters club. Find out from those guests or new members as you start to mentor them, what is it that you're here for? And then tell them how your club can help them in that goal. That will also help you with the guest to member conversion. Anybody have anything else on mentoring that they wanted to bring up or cover? Don't want to rush it along or anything like that. Just like I said, it could be a session in its own. Okay. If anybody has anything, we can always come back to it. Not a big deal at all. Education program awareness is where it would be nice to spend a few minutes, actually, because this is somewhere right now I feel like a number of clubs are in a position where it's a little bit awkward, because you've got members that are firmly in the traditional program. They love the traditional program, love picking up those physical manuals in their hands and reading through them and working through the projects. I love it too. But the reality is we've moved on to this new program, the Pathways Learning Experience, which is great in itself. It has many benefits, but it is a change. And with any change comes a challenge, because you've got those people that are ahead of the curve, that are really great into it, and those were our Pathways guides in this example. You've got other people that are kind of, yeah, I'll switch over whenever I finish these manuals or whatever they happen to be working on. And then you've got that chunk of members that are at the tail end of that change curve. And you may be one of them, and that's fine. But everybody goes through that differently. And to navigate your club through that is a huge challenge, because you're trying to onboard new members that don't have a choice. They have to go into that Pathways program. And if your club is talking about the CC and the CL, for example, there's no connection there. And that can isolate those new members and can really cause some problems with retention, especially if there's negative talk in the club about Pathways. Because I've heard this from some groups as well, that one of their barriers right now is there's a lot of negative talk about the Pathways Learning Experience. And that's going to happen to some extent, but the more new members can be made aware, this is the program, and reinforce with that and have some members in the club that are keen on Pathways, the more likely you are to bring those members that perhaps aren't as on board along with you. And, if they don't get on board, then eventually they're going to drop off anyways, likely. So it's a matter of trying to support all members, but especially new members, making them aware. They don't even need to know that there was a traditional program anymore, or if they do get told that there's a traditional program, then it can be just a mention. It doesn't have to be a detailed explanation of what that meant, but giving them something solid on pathways. There's some great resources out there. I've mentioned District 4 before. They've got a good website up with lots of information, and I've provided some resources as well. Reach out to me if you ever need anything else at all. We've got a leadership fair next Saturday where we're going to provide some more information and resources on pathways at a table, answer questions for you, and whatever other channels we can support in getting all of your club members comfortable, or as close to all as we can get, then I encourage that, because that's really a huge retention concern as well as a growth concern. And without members, there's definitely no member orientation and there's no club. So that would be horrible to see some clubs folding because of pathways. So whatever we can do to support, then please contact me. Happy to help, no matter whether it's a simple question or you need a teleconference with the club executive, or even in some cases for somebody to come out and talk to the club about the program. Survey of members' learning needs, and this gets right back to what I was saying on mentorship. This is from more the VP education side of things, understanding what the members want. And one of the challenges that just to add to what we were talking about with mentorship, that I challenge all of you to consider is, if you've got a mentee, sit down with them and ask them, okay, so when do you want to do your icebreaker speech, the first speech in the program? And they may say, I need some time. Or they may say, I want to do it next week. It's going to depend on the person, of course. But always, always, always remember, the person has walked through the door for a reason. And if you know their reason, for example, it's fear of public speaking and they want to do some speeches, you want to kind of encourage them along, obviously not push them, but encourage them along and say, you know what, why don't we set this date and we're going to work towards it? Because it's so easy to drag your heels and say, I'm going to put it off, because they're scared, and therefore it's hard for them just to say, I'm going to go for it. But if you say, you know what, let's pick a date, I don't know, a month and a half from today, for example, why don't you do your speech on that meeting day? I'll say, oh, okay, yeah, whatever, we'll work towards that. That gives you lots of time to work with them to get that speech ready and their confidence ready to give it a shot. On the flip side, one of the nice things to do, particularly if you've got somebody that's relatively confident going in, is get an idea, hey, how often do you want to speak? When do you want to finish level 1? And level 1 is just a total of 4 speeches and 1 speech evaluation. So they need to do 5 different things. If they want to do a speech a month, you can say, all right, well, why don't you finish that in the next 4 months then? And they'll probably agree to that. And then you've kind of got goals, and there's something inside them mentally that they're going to be set for that goal. And I found that really effective when I had a mentee, for example, that this was before we rolled out pathways, but I said to her, when do you want to do your icebreaker and when do you want to finish your confident communicator? And she finished it almost exactly on time. I mean, it might have been a couple weeks out or something. I think it was a couple weeks before we planned, actually. But it's incredible, the power of just setting that goal and reminding them of that. And that can be no matter what their goal is. So whatever they've walked in the door for, and you don't have to be the mentor to have that conversation. A good VP education will also know what a member is set for themselves, which is good for you as the VP education, because you can plan for not only the members' successes, but the club successes in the goals, the distinguished club goals that you achieve as a result. So I can't stress the importance enough of being aware of what the needs of individual members in the club are, and not making assumptions, because we don't all come for the same thing, that's for sure. One of the things that No Moments of Truth recommends is assigning a speaking role ASAP, and we've kind of already talked a little bit about this with having that conversation with them. And notice it says assign, not make them speak as soon as possible. It's just assign it, put that date out there, and then they're working towards that. So that's the main message there that I'm hoping to convey tonight is, put a date out there, set a goal, and I don't want to say forget it, but work towards that goal. That way you've taken care of, getting them into this, at least on the agenda in some aspect, so they know that they're just as included as the member that's been around for 40 years, for example. Continue to make them feel welcome. This is the portion that I'm most excited to talk about this evening, because this is about creating a little guide for your members. It's easy to do that induction and have some sort of protocol in place for a mentorship program and finding out members' needs, but putting together some content is really helpful, because they leave with something in their hands, which is one of the concerns I've heard from some clubs is, now I'm telling people to sign up for Toastmasters, but they're not going to get anything. They're just going to get a log into the website. Whereas, 6 months or a year ago, we were giving them mailing them a new member package. And many clubs, of course, were just giving them the CC and CL and saying, here you go, turn the ones you get in the mail into us, and we'll kind of keep rotating them. But now you can't do that. I mean, you could, but it would be not a good idea, because, of course, then the new member would be going down the wrong path, and when they go to apply for their education award, it's not going to be approved. So obviously there's some bad consequences to doing that. So what do we do, though? How do we make members still feel like, I'm getting something physical? It's not necessarily about manuals. It's just about having some sort of physical attachment to the club. And this is one of the best tools that I've seen a number of clubs doing. But I say a number of clubs, certainly not the majority. If your club is doing this, kudos to you. I'd love to hear in the chat about it, anything that you think makes your club unique in this aspect. We've got on the screen here two documents. I'll describe them a little bit for those joining by phone. So the first is more or less just a guide to what is in this booklet, and it outlines all the different products that they have. This is from Arbutus Toastmasters Club in Division C. And then on the other side of the screen is a warm welcome to Thunderbird Toastmasters, which is Club 396. That's in Division B. And it's just a short welcome to our club, followed by the Toastmasters promise. So that gets back to what Jan was saying a little bit earlier about reminding people that Toastmasters promise. So by having that in this booklet, you're reminding that new member, here's the promise that you signed and agreed to on the application. Because I can guarantee you almost every single person that signs up doesn't actually read word for word that application form and the Toastmasters promise. A lot of them just, there's the boxes for my information, fill it out, sign my name, I'm done. Unfortunately, that's the way we are these days. With the speed of the world, we're not taking the time to read everything that's put in front of us. So having it there, maybe when they get home and they've got a free evening or something, they can read through the manual and really reflect a little bit on that promise. A welcome letter from the president is also highly recommended. It's really nice to have that, hey, this is the president of the club letting you know that we're excited to have you. If you got any questions, here's where you can go. Why the package was put together, and what is Toastmasters? Because even though somebody may have come and, let's say they come as a guest once, signed up on the spot because they thought this was cool, that doesn't mean that they're aware that Toastmasters is in over 142 countries with almost 17,000 clubs now, I believe, 160 odd thousand members. It's a huge organization, and they may not know that. They may think that, whoa, this is the only club in town or only club in the world even. So letting them know what they've joined and kind of give them that pride in joining such a large organization that's helping people around the world with their communication and leadership skills. So just something to think about. If you are a club president, I highly recommend drafting up a letter. If you're not, ask your club president to draft it up and throw that into the kit as well, because it's really a nice touch, I think. Believe it or not, this particular letter on the screen is one that I wrote way back when I was club president of Trestle Toastmasters. So it's really nice touch, like I said, to have and to provide those new members. Meeting rules. This is absolutely critical. One of the challenges I've identified in the current club that I'm involved with is, we have these meeting rules, but we haven't really been reinforcing and supporting people in understanding what are they supposed to do. So when a new member joins, there is a gap because they don't know, like they see a Toastmaster and they kind of get an idea what a Toastmaster is doing, but they don't know, well, what does that look like behind the scenes? What do they do for preparation? What are they responsible for? And just a little bit more description around it. That's a relatively easy example of a Toastmaster, but you start getting into, I don't know, grammarian or even general evaluator. General evaluator, what are they responsible for? By providing that in this package, then you are not only have the president welcomed them to the club, reminded them of the promise, but now they have a better idea what meeting roles are. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can go out and do, general evaluator the next week, but at least they have a grasp of these are the different roles our club has, and this is kind of the responsibilities. And it starts to round out their knowledge a little bit and make them even more comfortable with the club. So I encourage you to have, I would say this is one of the minimum things. There's a lot of nice to haves, but this would be something that I would say you pretty much have to have in order to make sure your new members are onboarded in a way that they're comfortable. Other things you can include in the package would be, I noticed a really good resource on acronyms. A couple of the club packages that I've seen, they've got, what is a CC, what is a DTM, and the list went on. Real nice as well, because sometimes we do speak in that lingo, and I always cringe when, I'm in a club meeting or something, somebody says, would you like to be a DTM or something along those lines, and you're thinking, this poor person has no idea what a DTM is. So by having that acronym guide, it's not going to fill in all the blanks, but at least it may help the guests, or the new members rather, in translating whatever lingo we're using in the club. And we forget after some time, we're so used to language like that we may not be paying attention when somebody says DTM. We know what that means, but does, especially a first-time guest, definitely not. And that doesn't help them at all, right? Officer duties is also a nice to have because, first of all, it's letting people know who to speak to when you've got a question related to blank topic. Something like a treasurer is self-explanatory, but maybe the VP education is not quite as self-explanatory to a new member. The other side of it, though, is if somebody has come to practice leadership and get better leadership skills, then they may be inspired or interested in one of the roles. They may say, you know what, I want to be the next club sergeant at arms. That's where I want to start my leadership path. Great. And the third benefit by having the officer duties is you're reinforcing that these are leadership roles, because the vast majority of us don't see ourselves as leaders. And if you point out that, well, you know what, yeah, you may be the club secretary, and maybe you don't think you're a leader, but you are a leader, and here's why. So that's nice as well for the officers then to read and think, oh yeah, well, wait a second, I guess I am a leader in this way. It's not just the club president that's a leader, it's the whole executive. Contact details for club officers. One of the club's packages that I have actually has all club members' contacts. I don't know that I'd necessarily go that far with a brand new member. I mean, it's nice to have, here's the phone number for, Jim over there, because he's a nice member. But for a brand new member, I would recommend kind of narrowing it down just to the club officers. And that could even be, if you use the agenda template from Toastmasters.org, you can actually take the officers down the left-hand side, officers' names. You can include the phone numbers and email addresses there, right on the letter from the president. So that way you've kind of got the letter and the contact details right there, convenient, near the front of the booklet for your new members. Information about the education program, also really important, particularly now. I wouldn't put in the picture that I showed, the path to Distinguished Toastmaster, for example. Maybe just more something along the lines of, here's how you go into the website and pick the path for you, and this is what level 1 is going to look like. It's going to be 4 speeches in 3 different projects, and kind of leave it at that. So they have an idea. You could include a map, perhaps, of like how to get to level 5, for example, or something along those lines. But I don't know that I would rush to give them too much information. How the mentorship program works. That goes back to earlier as well, the importance of having a mentorship program in the first place. Letting them know, is a mentor going to be assigned to them? Is it going to be they have to request? Do they get a choice in the mentor, or is it just this is going to be your mentor? How does your club do it? Regardless how it works, every single new member needs to understand what is the process for your mentorship program. Your club success plan. So that's something I have seen, I believe only one club do this in the booklet. I think it's a pretty good idea. It's a transparent way of leading the club. It emphasizes the importance of having a success plan. It for a really keen new member, it lets them know, hey, this is our plans, how bold they are, or hopefully not, anything too crazy, but something that really shows them that your club has a plan. It's not a club that's just kind of week by week. There's excitement here. There's a reason to be here, and if they become president in a year or 2, or whenever they run for it, for example, they're going to see that club success plan as something that's just part of what the club does and an important component. So I personally like having it in there. Like I said, I've only seen one club do it, but I'm working with my club, and this is one of the exciting things about doing this webinar is my club right now is having some real challenges with membership, and there's a whole range of challenges that have been identified, and one of them has been we've had to move, which of course is tough for any club when you move venues. But this is another thing that we haven't had, and so now I'm pushing them really hard to say, you know what, let's get this developed, and the club success plan is something that I'll highly recommend they include in it as well, just for that reason, to make it kind of a standard of the club. And finally, frequently asked questions. I saw this in one as well, different one that had the club success plan, but it was nice because it was just those, basic questions about the club and how it operates and who to contact and just anything that a new member may need to know. And the benefit with all these items is you can add, remove, modify at any time. I mean, this is just documents you put together on a computer and then you print it out. And what the clubs typically have done that I've seen make these, so they just get some, duotangs at the dollar store or something. So it's really low cost. They're just in duotangs or even binders you could do. I think one of the dollar stores sells binders for $1.25. I mean, they're not fancy, but they work. They do the trick, right? And it's something you can physically give a new member. Welcome to our club. Here's your binder with the information. And if you find the new member says, hey, I have a question about this, easy to slip that into FAQ and drop it into the next binder for the next new member, etc., and just make it better and update it once a year, like do a major update once a year with, a new letter from the president and any new club success plan, anything else that's kind of changed in your club since the time you did it. So I haven't seen much going on in the chat this evening. I suspect people are hopefully really engaged with this, or perhaps eating turkey or something, given it's Thanksgiving tomorrow. I'd love to hear though, what are your thoughts on having a booklet like this? And does your club do this? And did I miss anything that your club puts in here that you think is valuable?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the clubs I was a member of, my original home club, used to give out a club manual, and the club manual had in it a little bit of history on the club, which I love that because it had, the past executives for the last 30 years or whatever it was. And it also had just some background around the club itself. But then it got into each of the meetings, the agenda and how the meetings are set up and the roles within the meeting. And I'm not sure if it actually got into the executive roles as such within the club manual, because that would be a repeat of what was in of what's in the official club manual. But what was specific about the club was how the meetings were run and what they did during the meetings and how they were run and organized. So that was really handy. Each member got that. They got a hard copy of it, plus a soft copy was available on the website. So people knew what to expect and they knew where to go. So it had like scripts in there if you were the chair. And so you knew that this is what you would be following. All that stuff was available to you as a member, as a new member. I thought that was absolutely brilliant because everything that you needed in order to be to get you started as a member was there.
Wow, that is really neat. I'm going to note that down myself. So scripts for the various roles, history of the club, including the officers, you're saying. So like they'd have past presidents, a list of past presidents?
They had the listing of it. Yeah, I can send you them. I started to do one for a member that Anna is a member of, who's on the call. It's a lot of work to maintain it, though, but it is a really handy resource to have. And then the other thing that the club did, they had the Sergeant Arms carried in on the meetings. They had all of the roles and the scripts for all the roles were individually printed out because people weren't expected to bring their manuals. So they had the roles printed out and the scripts so that if somebody signed up to be a chair or a Toastmaster or a table topic master, although that didn't have as long a script, they had the script so you could do a proper introduction. You could take on the role fairly quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's neat. Because that's the other thing is it's a little bit of a shift for, I think, us in general with pathways, and the fact that in level 1, your first meeting role that you're required to do is speech evaluator. And I remember, like, when I joined Toastmasters, I was okay speaking in front of a little bit of a group. I mean, certainly not nearly as good as I am today. Not that I'm good today necessarily. Not trying to promote myself there, but what I'm trying to say is to have some sort of script for a lot of things, or tips and suggestions, things that you can provide to guests and new members, it really helps with that, because I was not very comfortable with doing speech evaluator. Like, I did pretty much every other role before I did that, and now you're expected in level 1 to do that. So by having resources, it certainly helps members get a little bit more comfortable from early on, and sounds like your club had a lot of that support that gave members that boost. I noticed in the chat here, we've got Lisa has also mentioned that we have orders of the day to explain the meeting roles. I like the idea of the welcome from the president. Nell has been providing the handout Michael provided about the various paths in the guest package. And we're not talking about guest package today, but I do want to encourage that as well, because it gets back to that theory. Giving somebody something physical is some way it shifts the way we think about things. And that's another thing I'm working with this club on right now is, a new member club handbook or orientation or whatever we title it as well as guest package. And that can be as simple as, another letter, for example, from the president or from VP membership or something, some information about the program or what the club does, and a membership application along with the cost. The cost is important because, of course, the membership application just has the cost Toastmasters International charges. At a minimum, even if you charge that amount, you're converting it to Canadian, so people need to know that. Let's see. Jan's mentioned when a member joins, we give them a folder with a few items, including a role outline for the first few roles they might take part in. For example, grammarian, smile story, or inspiration. To others, this seems to make them comfortable with joining into the conversations quickly. We're definitely seeing that as a trend, that giving people something about roles in particular, whether it be scripts or just general information, helps people become more confident quickly at getting into those roles, which of course means that they're jumping into the program faster and getting involved. And as soon as they're getting involved, then they're likely to stay members longer. Whereas if they're kind of not sure and they're nervous, then it's easy to watch people come in and then they show up for 2 meetings and they disappear again. And that's especially common if you're having trouble converting guests to members. Look at that. Look at what you're giving your guests and how engaged all your members are. Because if they're being provided something, they see an engaged crowd, then your membership conversion rate should be pretty strong. Keelan said that, I'm wondering, do we have regular follow-up about mentorship, especially for new members? I think that really depends on the individual club. This is another area that my club is not doing very good on. Being very transparent, there's a lot of things that we do good, but there's some critical things that we're working on right now that we're developing in. And, the club is committed to working on these number of items that we're falling short on. And mentorship is something that we're assigning them, but there's not regular follow-up about, hey, how's it going? What do you need? And that's just as critical as assigning the mentor in the first place. Because if you just, this is, Sean, you're going to love me for saying this, but this is about going beyond the checkbox. This is not about a box, okay, I've assigned a mentor, and wiping your hands clean and that's it, I'm done. No, you have to follow up and say, how's it going? Are you getting what you need from your mentor? And ask the mentor, hey, how's things going with the mentee? Are you guys working well together? Are you being able to find enough time to support them? Do the times that they're available work for you, etc.? Because if it's just set it and forget it, then there may not be any mentoring happening at all. I've been involved in situations before where that's kind of what's happened is, I've even been, assigned a mentor role and I wasn't even aware. And, these poor members are waiting for me to reach out to them. Well, I had no idea. So I think that's specific to the club, and I certainly encourage mentorship program, a strong mentorship program in the club. I'm saying all these things, though, and I recognize it's a lot to expect, especially the VP education is responsible for so much, particularly now with, they're trying to manage a traditional program that's phasing out and a pathways program, mentorship program, and they're new themselves to a lot of this, at least. So I encourage clubs to always consider having some sort of assistant person to the VP education, or it could just be, you don't even have to title it as that. You could just ask somebody, hey, could you take care of, for example, scheduling for the next 6 months? Could you take care of the mentorship program and have somebody that's specific, like the chief mentor of the club, and they're kind of going out and coordinating and marrying up those mentors and mentees and doing the follow-up. Any portion of the VP education's role could really be tasked out. And that's the nice thing about it, is they have some clear cut roles they're responsible for. And it's probably the easiest position to actually piecemeal out for that reason, because it's, like I said, it's so easy. You grab that mentorship role and you send it over to somebody else. And you could even have another person. I know Rise and Shine in Victoria, they grew to, I believe it was 50 plus members at one point. That's a lot of people to kind of manage a schedule for, and all the other things that come with that. So the VP education for that club did have 2 people that were helping out. One of them was just doing scheduling only, and the other, I can't remember exactly what they were doing, but I think it might have been something to do with mentorship. So then the VP education themselves could worry more about, okay, what are individuals' goals and how do I support them in reaching those, and, of course, processing the education awards and those types of things. So by having 3 people do one role, it was relatively light work, even for a club of 50 people. It can be done. And, Keelan, I know you have come from China, and there's some huge clubs over there, and I suspect they do the same type of thing. I mean, when I look at some of the dashboards in districts 89, 88, and 85, which is the 3 districts that cover portions of China, there's members that are, or there's clubs rather, that have 80 plus members, and it must be the same thing when you've got that many members, that you're splitting those roles out for sure. Well, what I'd like to do is I would like to provide some resources, and I will send some things out to you along with the recording of this. One of those things will be the induction script, and I'll send some aspects of these packages as well, just in case you want to modify them or kind of you use them at kind of your discretion for your club. I mean, I always encourage clubs building one themselves that really represents their club well, but it can be good inspiration or a good base to start with and kind of build on in order to provide similar packages. And then just think about that moments of truth and how that integrates with what your club is doing, because ideally you're hitting every single point in that moments of truth. It's probably not possible to hit every single one, but if your goal is to go for all of them, then you're sure to have a really quality club that's able to attract new members and, to some extent, more importantly, retain the members that you get. I mean, retention is always going to be a little bit of a challenge with people moving and all those other things, but don't make quality the reason that people are leaving. It should be, they're moving, or their life circumstances changed, or they've got what they've come for. That's for sure. And I want to thank all of you then for joining this evening and taking the hour out to talk about this important topic. If you want to reach out to me, I always welcome you to contact me. There's my email address on the screen. If you want to arrange a phone call, like I said, anything I can do to help your club, I am super happy to help, and that's what I'm here for. So have a great evening, and hopefully everyone has a fantastic Thanksgiving. If you have not already enjoyed your Thanksgiving dinner, please certainly enjoy it. And I look forward to seeing you out there sometime in the near future.